For a century, the relentless conflict with the nation next door raged, littering the land with abandoned swords and shields. The enormous castle did not resemble anything from a popular wizarding theme park. According to the man peering through his binoculars, this location actually belonged to a fantasy realm. Despite everything, this place truly served as an ideal setting for an actual confrontation. In a peaceful area close to the gate, untouched by the bombing, a girl asked a boy for help with the rice harvest. Instead of lending a hand, the boy dashed away at lightning speed, leaving her behind. Each day, Fungo vanished into the forest, his reasons a mystery. His companions soon joined him in what they called the Great Escape. Fungo then wondered aloud whether Roka had managed to slip away without causing any trouble. Each day, the two friends ventured into the forest, never missing their routine. Their journey always led them to a special spot, a shaded grove beside the river where the atmosphere felt just right. Fungo would often rest his back against a sturdy tree, securing victory in their latest game. His companion, agile and playful, would swing through the branches just behind him. She announced that the next challenge was to reach a distant tree. The boy felt a surge of anxiety, sensing her competitive edge. He cautioned her not to venture too far, reminding her that the nearby lake was dangerous. As stepped on a fragile branch, she lost her footing and fell, leaving Fungo watching in alarm as the situation spiraled out of control. The girl tumbles helplessly, with nothing available to break her fall. She plunges into the river below, yet to her, this is simply one more thrilling escapade in a life full of excitement. Roka's friend, overwhelmed by fear, urgently called out to her, begging her to swim back to safety. This secluded spot, hidden from adults, served as the perfect retreat for the children, a sanctuary for their secrets. In a desperate voice, Fungo warned Roka of impending danger. Without warning, a sea creature burst from the water, lunging toward her. Instinctively, Roka raised her hand and unleashed a bolt of lightning, obliterating the threat in an instant. This was the special ability she kept hidden from others. To her, it was nothing out of the ordinary. Later, the group gathered around a blazing campfire, skewering pieces of the defeated sea creature as if they were hosting a backyard. They noticed a group of plants known as. Fungo wondered aloud if she liked the flowers, but she quickly shook her head, uninterested. He went on to mention that his mother believed those flowers carried misfortune. People even referred to them as the flower of the dead. Rolled her eyes, dismissing the idea of names as meaningless inventions by humans. She thought about how, if anyone discovered her abilities, they would likely label her a witch. She also questioned whether Fungo would accept such a rumor. He promises himself to keep her secret, the fact that she's a good person, even with her powers, for as long as he lives. Hearing this fills her with happiness. She reaches out and softly brushes her hand against his cheek. Then shares her wish that they marry when they're older. The boy's face flushes an even deeper red, brighter than any stop sign. Because he alone knows about her abilities, she feels completely secure around Fungo. He hopes they can always stay together, though part of him also wishes she'd get off him now. Warmth and joy swell inside the protagonist as they realize how unique their connection is. From that moment, Fungo develops a crush and begins to dream about a future with her. Fungo spotted the man and identified him as Mr. Mao, noting that it had been 6 months since their previous encounter. Curious about the situation back home, Fungo inquired about the country's state, to which Mr. Mao replied that nothing had changed. It was now the man's opportunity to seek information. He was searching for skilled fighters. In response, the old man revealed that he had discovered a hunter. In the mountains, Fungo's hunting abilities had earned him the position of captain, leading 100 soldiers. Because of this reputation, the merchant was eager to find out whether Fungo was acquainted with anyone in the area who possessed unusual abilities. Fungo wondered aloud whether a person with extraordinary powers had the potential to be a hero. In response, the elderly man assured him that such an individual might even have the power to change the course of history itself. At that instant, Fungo remembers Roka and decides to reveal his most closely guarded secret. He is just a young boy, unable to fully understand what might happen because of his actions. His intentions are pure, though he often acts without thinking things through. As time passes and daylight fades into evening, a figure slowly comes into view against the setting sun. Knights arriving from the capital made their presence known, while Fungo remained in place, silently observing the events as they developed. Someone passed by on horseback. The soldiers seized his friend and led him away. Himself was soon pulled along by the soldiers as well. The boy remains motionless, unable to move as if paralyzed by fear. She glances over her shoulder at him, while his hands remain around her. Someone held him firmly, preventing him from chasing after her. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she desperately reached out to her friend, hoping for help. Had been taken away because of his actions, and she never returned. Ever since then, a heavy sense of guilt had settled in his heart. The grove remains unchanged, yet an unfamiliar atmosphere hangs in the air. The campfire lies cold and forgotten, and Fungo sits in solitude. No familiar voice echoes through the trees, calling out to him. The boy's only wish had been for her to rise as the nation's hero, but reality weighs heavily. He now realizes she will have to hurt many people, and there's a real chance she could lose her own life. Overwhelmed by anger, drives his fist into the earth, hot tears streaming down his cheeks. Confusion and frustration cloud the boy's mind. He cannot believe his own foolishness, yet he is at a loss for what to do next. His gaze falls on a nearby branch as he searches. Was determined to fix his mistakes and rescue Roka, hoping to restore her to who she once was. To achieve this, he knew he needed to become stronger, so he made his way directly to her location. Several years quickly passed by. The knights prepared themselves for the coming battle. With their spears poised, they charged fearlessly into the heart of the fight. The opposing forces brimmed with energy, their excitement matching that of their rivals. Their commander raised a trumpet and sounded it loudly, signaling the start of the confrontation. The sound of weapons colliding filled the air with an intensity that rivaled the energy of a live rock concert. Chaos consumed the battlefield as soldiers fell, their blood turning the ground crimson. In the midst of the carnage, a squad leader cautioned the inexperienced members against reckless actions, reminding them of their status as knight apprentices and urging them to simply absorb the atmosphere of the conflict. Abruptly, announced his urgent need for a bathroom break. The boy. He confesses his regret about enrolling in the Knight Academy and feels overwhelmed with anxiety, while his friend encourages him to stay nearby. Confidently announces his intention to defeat every opponent in sight. Stands in awe, unable to find words, deeply impressed by his friend's determination. Suddenly, a gigantic bolt of lightning flashes across the horizon, its force so intense that it causes a small explosion. Observed that lightning had taken down the entire front line, but understood that this wasn't the whole truth. It was nothing more than an ordinary storm. He gestured in the direction of the flashing lightning. He identifies the figure as Roka, known as the Empress of Thunder. 10 years earlier, her arrival marked a turning point for the Kingdom of, as she quickly propelled it to greatness by defeating groups of 100 soldiers at once. At last, arrives where his friend should be, only to discover that the chaos of the battlefield has already consumed her. From that moment forward, he devoted himself to rescuing her, determined to succeed at any cost. The captain raised his voice, commanding the crew to move after him. Without warning, a spear struck him, leaving the entire squad stunned. The enemy had moved in swiftly, soldiers from the Whale Kingdom now surrounded them. The newcomers scattered in every direction, each one racing away with all the speed they could muster. All of them stood firm, blocking the hero's path except for who remained rooted to the spot, unable to move. The young man swiftly defeats one of the enemy soldiers. A second attacker suddenly rushed toward him, brandishing a dagger with intent to strike. The sword passes so close to him that it only just brushes against his skin. Remained determined, refusing to allow anyone to stand in his way. He was determined to defeat every opponent necessary. The boy transformed his suffering and remorse into powerful energy. With each strike, another adversary was overcome by his assault. Without hesitating, he dashes straight at Roka, determined not to lose any time. For the journey was only starting. Yet another adversary fell at the hero's feet, and the steadily became crowded with those already conquered. As another year slipped by, completed his soldier training and received his graduation. The main character received an unexpected invitation to become part of a covert squad. Upon meeting his new commander, learned that his impressive achievements at the academy had already made an impression. However, this specialized team focused on infiltrating rival lands, collecting crucial information, and sometimes eliminating threats. Curious about his role, wondered aloud if he would have the chance to battle at the forefront. The leader assured him that the possibilities were limitless, and his future missions could take many forms. The man had high expectations for his newest team member, so he advised to relax and take a break. The protagonist finds himself compelled to accept the situation. Meanwhile, and relax on the rooftop, their curiosity piqued by some construction happening far away. His companion guesses that the structure might be a radio tower, though doesn't really understand what that is. admires achievements, pointing out that he only just finished school and has already joined a special group. Despite this praise, feels a pang of jealousy toward his friend. Goes on to predict that the conflict is likely to end soon, with the Kingdom of on the verge of victory. The credit belonged to the elite squad under the command of the Thunder Emperor. Rumors spread that the Whale Kingdom was preparing to negotiate a peace agreement, leaving the protagonist deep in thought. Lost in contemplation, the protagonist watches as forces the enemy to retreat, cutting off any chance for their escape. There is hope that the conflict might end before a fight even begins. A sense of urgency grows within the protagonist, aware that his opportunity is slipping away. At the same time, his friend feels a surge of excitement upon hearing the latest developments. At last, the long-awaited day of his inaugural mission has come. The protagonist prepared himself for action, but his leader urged him to relax and addressed any lingering uncertainties he had. The secret team operated under straightforward rules. Members had to finish their mission, or else risk losing their lives in the attempt. Felt confident as he accepted the situation without hesitation. The leader passed a set of mission papers to him. He examined the instructions carefully to understand his assignment. The first task involved something called the Empress of Thunder. His objective was to end her life, leaving completely stunned. The leader reveals his knowledge that the boy and the girl share the same. He wonders if this connection is the reason the command assigned such a difficult mission to someone so inexperienced. The protagonist, filled with anger, insists on an explanation, reminding everyone that she is the nation's champion, and her efforts have nearly brought the war to a close. However, the leader calmly explains that her success is precisely what has caused the problem. From that moment forward, the focus shifted entirely to creating an atmosphere of tranquility. With such immense power in play, the balance of the New World Order faced a serious threat. Was not working alone. Several other assassins were on the hunt for the last surviving heroes, and none of them would return until their mission was completely finished. The leader firmly reiterates the decision, leaving no room for doubt. Meanwhile, is overwhelmed by the chaos of the moment, venting his frustration by furiously breaking things in his room. His friend remains frozen nearby, staring in shock and disbelief, unable to comprehend the events unfolding before him. The protagonist quickly changes his tone, explaining that his nervousness stems from anxiety about the upcoming mission. Admits he lacks the proper authorization to access the details, yet he remains confident that things will work out as they should. The boy goes on to clarify that if his friend fails, someone else from their team will be assigned to complete the mission, since that's simply the way their group operates. The protagonist becomes even more unsettled by this. Knew he couldn't allow things to go wrong. No matter what it took, he was determined to succeed. The hero began his grand journey, stepping forward on the long-awaited day to enter the battlefield. Determined and resolute, he moved towards his destination, ready for whatever challenges awaited him. The hero began his adventure by riding away on a horse. Traveled across several war-torn areas, navigating his way through active battlefields. He notices a large number of wounded soldiers around him and decides to use the moment to gather information about the best way to proceed. As the journey continues, he finds himself confronting opposing soldiers on the battlefield. Determined to be alone, she eliminated anyone who stood between her and solitude. He questions whether his friend still remembers him, or if the passage of time has caused him to be forgotten. For the moment the battle comes to an end, stands exhausted, his body trembling slightly from the ordeal. He notices the sinister-looking flower standing out amid the chaos of the battlefield. The strange plant has taken root in this very place. The boy stood there and abruptly sensed that something was unusual. He caught sight of something he couldn't quite identify. They tried to make sense of the situation, suspecting that the unfamiliar weapon might be a new invention known as a firearm. The once orderly battlefield had now erupted into complete chaos, resembling a war zone. A sudden flash of lightning splits the sky above. Standing amidst a sea of blooming flowers, she appears, stares in disbelief, questioning what he sees. He attempts to get the attention of the friend he grew up with. The woman inquires whether the protagonist belongs to the covert group. Attempts to assure Roka of their friendship, emphasizing that he journeyed all the way from his village solely for her sake. Despite his explanation, the girl accuses him of coming only to remove her from her current life. Additional assassins arrived on the scene, called forth a surge of electricity, gathering lightning at her command. The main character is left with no choice but to observe helplessly while events take their course. As a surge of electricity overwhelmed her foes, the protagonist managed to evade the shocking assault at the very last moment. More killers sprang from the shadows behind her, catching her off guard, urgently shouted a warning, trying to alert her to the danger. She turns her gaze toward the area he indicated, yet danger arrives before she can react. A blade drives through the skin. Helpless, finds herself face to face with the unfolding turmoil. Succeeds in rescuing her, and the two of them now stand together. As she summoned a surge of lightning, the hero prepared for action. He swung his sword with precision, moving in perfect sync with his partner, and together they proved to be an unbeatable team. Once more, the protagonist revealed his identity as explaining that after a decade, he had at last arrived to rescue her. Only then did realize who he was. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. He struck his shoulder. He shouted desperately for her, but lost her balance and fell, injuring herself. Just as she is about to collapse, he manages to grab hold of her in time. The assailant turns out to be a skilled sniper. Hurled his father across the room. The blow struck her eye, prompting him to cry out for in a moment of desperation. The boy collapses, overcome with tears, feeling hopeless because he failed to keep her safe. The girl calmly reveals that she had always expected things to turn out like this. In her heart, she had known that he would be powerless when the war erupted. Lately, soldiers have appeared, armed with new weapons created by the king. For this reason, joined forces with individuals who possessed sacred abilities. They intended to escape to the Kingdom of Whale, a plan that left utterly stunned. Their strategy began with disguising themselves as soldiers, hoping this would allow them to shift the balance of power in the ongoing conflict. After spending so much time battling beside, she finally understood what action she was determined to take. Everyone around seemed to have a dark side. Wondered aloud about her intentions, seeking clarity. If his purpose for coming was to take her life, the girl gently reached out, placing her hand on his cheek, and explained that he had been selected because he was her childhood friend. The boy stands frozen in disbelief, though the shock quickly fades. He remained determined to flee with her to the neighboring kingdom, refusing to abandon her. The blossomed once more, just as it had in the past. The entity was referred to as the Demon Flower. The flower named Thunderflower, also known as the Flower of Evil, symbolizes coming together once more. Meanwhile, inside the royal castle, a man approaches a guard to inquire about the king's whereabouts. The guard, a youthful attendant, replies that the king has secluded himself in his quarters. Ignoring this, the man pushes past and enters the king's private chambers anyway. The commander, G, announced that the group of 5 heroes had disappeared, suspecting they had escaped to a different place. The king declared that the group would no longer serve any purpose for the country. Despite this, insisted that allowing them to remain could lead to complications. King Albert Einstein, however, insists that the idea is completely mistaken. The group boasts that their weapons make them untouchable. In an alternate reality, he is known for his sharp intellect and his passion for harmony. However, in this world, destiny has marked him as the future ruler of all. Winter's grip on the kingdom had tightened, bringing harsh conditions to its people. The commander loudly commanded the soldiers to search for anyone possessing divine abilities, putting special emphasis on capturing the Thunder Empress. It seemed likely that the group was fleeing toward the Whale Kingdom, prompting the command to eliminate everyone. Every soldier agreed to carry out this directive. Meanwhile, found himself trapped in the chaos, overwhelmed with anxiety for his companion. In another nearby location, impressions marked the snowy ground. The snowdrifts turned out to be much higher than had anticipated. The hero approached Roka to see how she was feeling, and to find out if her injury had improved. She explains that her condition has improved, and she credits him for stopping the bleeding. His excitement grew when he heard the news. The boy observed that everything was very different now. She nodded in agreement, understanding that this was simply the way life unfolded. A decade spent fighting on the front lines of the war had transformed everyone involved. Despite everything, she manages to keep a part of her former self alive, thanks to the happy memories from her childhood. The girl expressed her gratitude to her friend, though he insisted he was unworthy of her thanks. He explained that his desire to see her had been the true reason he came. The problem was that he remained unable to reveal what was really going on. Worries that telling the truth about what happened might destroy their friendship. He wondered if hiding the truth forever might somehow make everything improve on its own. though deep down he knew that was unlikely. At some point, he would need to reveal the truth about what occurred, regardless of how complicated things became, even if it meant putting their friendship at risk. Expressed her longing for the way things were in the past, but her friend believed that those days were gone forever. One explanation offered was that the girl had gained some weight. When she heard this, anger flared within her. The protagonist found herself amused, noticing that her friend's sulky expression remained exactly the same as always. Meanwhile, warned her companion to be careful. From this point forward, the group found themselves within the borders of the Whale Kingdom. In the distance lay a place known as the Millennium Tree, a gathering site for individuals with unique abilities. Upon learning this, the hero became instantly intrigued. The group would soon encounter the Emperor of Life, a being gifted with the power to instantly mend any injury. Remembered catching just a single glimpse of him, so they understood there was no time to waste. After hurrying, the two eventually reached their rendezvous point. Couldn't help but marvel at the tree's vibrant appearance despite the cold season. Meanwhile, noticed something unusual, a shadow moving stealthily in the area. However, the figure that appeared was not the one they had anticipated. Standing before them was the Emperor of Flames. He claimed to have arrived much earlier than expected, yet couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The Emperor stood before them, his entire body draped in regal garments. Arrows flew through the air, leaving both characters stunned by the unexpected attack. In an instant, assassins emerged from their hiding places. Snow covered the ground as figures appeared, unmistakably hailing from the Whale Kingdom. Unaware, the crew had stumbled directly into an ambush. Roka shouted urgently, telling everyone to escape. Quickly estimated there were no fewer than 20 warriors approaching. Additionally, because his friend was injured, he found it impossible to relax. He gently placed her on the ground, which left her puzzled and unsure. The boy unsheathed his sword, determined to fight. He resolved that, no matter what happened to him, would make sure their enemies would not escape unscathed. The girl could only watch in stunned silence. As they stood together, enemies closed in from all sides, preparing for battle. Their leader signaled for the group to wait, prompting everyone to lower their weapons. Weapons were at the ready. The man explained that the Dew crew fully understood fugitives with special powers were no longer considered foes. Still, the crew remained indifferent, holding on to grudges because the emperors had eliminated many of their friends, fueling their desire for vengeance. However, the man warned that this relentless pursuit of payback would ultimately destroy their own kingdom from within. The Whale Kingdom consists of multiple tribes, making it challenging for them to come together as a single force. At the same time, the warrior expresses regret over the Emperor of Flames' demise. He hopes the situation could have turned out another way, yet he knows that their enemies remain determined to launch their assault regardless. The warrior leader encouraged the opposing group to reconsider their actions, reminding them of their nation's difficult situation. However, an unexpected change in the atmosphere caught everyone's attention as they all became aware of something unusual appearing overhead. From afar, the shape resembled a bird, yet it was something entirely different, making its way from the mysterious land known as. The protagonist suspects that it might be some kind of new weapon. Even couldn't figure out what was happening. Something unknown began its slow descent. Suddenly, an intense light erupted, followed by a tremendous explosion. The main character wrapped their arms around, positioning themselves protectively between and any potential danger. She took the full force of the explosion, whereas the others only experienced its shockwave from a distance. A thick pillar of smoke rose in the distance, marking the only thing visible on the horizon. Deep within the castle walls, the king inquired about the landing site, receiving disappointing news from his men that it had fallen farther east than they had hoped. Meanwhile, Einstein recognized the need to make adjustments, while the development of GPS and nuclear weapons remained unfinished. The commander, curious about the nature of their weapon, wondered aloud if it was some sort of magic similar to that wielded by the Holy Knights. Einstein understood that the kingdom was still technologically behind, relying solely on a small team of technicians he had personally trained at a local manufacturing plant. He knew he had to improve his abilities quickly to ensure his kingdom gained an advantage before their rivals could catch. At the same time, near the tree, stood in awe at the sheer strength displayed by his newly formed army. His friend remarked how the devastation far surpassed anything the Holy Knight had ever caused. The warrior wondered aloud whether the crew now understood his point. Gain, a member of the group, remarked that the situation demonstrated the necessity for all the tribes to unite. Within the Whale Kingdom, the arrival of a soldier is seen as a deep gesture of honor toward the one he faces. From afar, a different voice echoed, commenting on how the blast had deeply unsettled everyone present. The troops immediately identified the woman as Patriarch Anna, though she seemed more interested in hearing whether the Patriarch believed the people were merely a group of undercover agents. Gain dismissed the idea, insisting that no one would ever risk sending their best team disguised as spies. The woman cautioned that they had to remain vigilant, reminding him that not just anyone could become a holy knight. She explained that before the tribes could come together, they would need to establish trust among themselves. Understood her perspective, recognizing the challenge Patriarch described. Explained that it was difficult to place faith in those willing to betray their own homeland. Reached out and seized a nearby soldier, insisting that a ceremony needed to be held. Meanwhile, the protagonist noticed his friend in the crowd, along with another colleague standing close by. Patriarch Anna explains that earning trust now means considering those who were once allies as adversaries. Considers to be his closest friend. Upon hearing this, the woman's excitement grows, believing that if can defeat the boy, he will prove himself to be trustworthy. The protagonist stands in shock, unable to comprehend the words reaching his ears. Meanwhile, surveys the chaotic situation they've found themselves in. She reassures her friend, insisting that she can take care of things alone and encouraging them to escape while they still can. Quickly responds, telling her not to make such outrageous statements. He reminds her that he has already promised never to leave her by herself again. Despite everything, the girl wished he wouldn't go to such lengths on her behalf. Despite the challenges, the protagonist remains determined and continues onward, makes his way toward the Patriarch. Explained that he had been chosen to go after the Holy Knights, but his teammates were defeated by a powerful group, leaving him trapped in a difficult situation. Because of this, he felt regretful about what had happened. Reassured, urging her to stay strong and promising that he would discover a solution to their predicament. Remained firm in her decision, refusing any alternative. She extended her hand and offered him her knife. Is able to grab the blade and use it to harm the woman. Working as a team, they would be able to take on the remaining 2 soldiers. Roka stood trapped, with no way to break free from her predicament. She was already injured, and he realized he would not make it to her in time. Faced with urgency, the protagonist understood he had to make a decision about where his loyalties lay. Fixed his gaze on her. The boy finds himself torn, uncertain about which choice to make. He found himself unable to make a decision. Reached out and grabbed the knife, his expression regretful as he murmured an apology to his friend. He drove the knife into, while Einstein looked on. Known as the mastermind responsible for developing the theory of relativity, he changed the world of physics. The man known as the father of physics was both brilliant and easygoing, earning admiration throughout history. His reputation placed him among the most esteemed individuals ever known. Out of nowhere, a soldier rushed in with urgent news. The Holy Knights had invaded the territory of the Whale Kingdom. Despite the alarm, the king remained unfazed, instructing his subordinate to stay calm. These events seemed meaningless to him, as he believed he was destined to rule the entire world. The scene then shifted back to the sacred tree. Dark patches of blood marred the white snow as looked at his friend with regret, pleading silently for forgiveness. The boy appears confused by the situation, yet a brief smile crosses his face. In the next instant, tumbles down. Observed everything unfolding before her, a sense of powerlessness weighing her down. Noted that the boy hadn't died yet, but warned that he had just 5 minutes left before he would lose too much blood. Believes their preparedness proves they can handle any challenge that comes their way. The leader agrees, deciding that, for the time being, this level of readiness will suffice. Before departing, the woman points out that a castle lies ahead, and explains that the knights will find them waiting at that location. The friends found themselves by themselves as made his way toward the house. As she approached, she inquired about the boy's identity, prompting him to respond. He claims to be an old friend from military school, but that hardly matters anymore. Now, something mysterious seems to be hiding among the trees. The Fire Emperor was nowhere to be seen. He had already been defeated. The answer had to be the ice, earth, and most importantly, the life element. Bursts into laughter, clearly enjoying being in the spotlight. The girl immediately identified the man as the Holy Knight, noticing the powerful sense of healing that seemed to surround him. The main character then recalled experiencing that very same presence during a previous battle. Fungo pleaded with the knight, desperately asking for help to rescue his friend. Made no effort to lend a hand. Even Roka approached him, requesting his support. The knight wandered over, but only just. She moved straight past the two boys without stopping. Approached Roka to see how she was doing. Meanwhile, the main character desperately begged to heal his companion as well, but the stern expression on the holy knight's face made it clear that he had no intention of offering help. He claims that recruits straight from school mean nothing to him, insisting it would be preferable for his life to end immediately. The main character is left utterly at a loss for words. At this point, prepares to demonstrate his abilities. The healer grabs her own shoulder, and with his free hand he makes contact with the earth. Fungo senses a surge of untamed power, and suddenly, a tree standing behind him has all its vitality drained away. All the branches that had fallen to the ground were finished as well. Things only became more dire. Now, even the revered sacred tree fell. As this happened, the injury on her body began to heal. Explained that he absorbed the energy from the trees to recover, and that this ability is what made him the Emperor of Life. Because they found themselves trapped in a frozen wilderness where survival was unlikely, the knight chose not to use his energy on someone who had little chance of making it. Faced with this situation, the protagonist wondered aloud if it was possible to exchange one life to save another. Prepared himself to risk everything for the sake of his friend's safety. The knight cautioned that using this power would consume a significant amount of his own life force. Despite the warning, the hero agreed immediately, showing no sign of reluctance. His companion pointed out that this could nearly exhaust all of the hero's strength, but Fungo remained determined to proceed. The girl's face showed clear concern for what was happening. Suddenly, she lost her composure and insisted that this decision was completely irrational. She reminded them that it had taken a decade for their group to come back together. Struggling to express something heartfelt, she began to say that from this moment forward, they could experience a life brimming with hope. Memories of when they were united in the past struck him deeply. Despite the emotional blow, Fungo remained determined, refusing to give up. At the beginning, he had attacked his friend with a knife, so now he must face the consequences for his actions. He was overwhelmed by guilt, burdened by the mistakes he had made. Considers whether he is truly prepared for the challenge ahead and decides to attempt using his magic. He also recognizes that reducing Roka's potential romantic rivals could work out in his favor. They walked toward the boy who had collapsed. After reaching him, he gently rested his hand on the main character's chest. The creature began to sap away his energy, yet the sensation was neither painful nor agonizing. It felt much more like narrowly escaping death. Without warning, the boy spots a lifeless tree. He feels completely lost, unsure of his surroundings. The scene reminds him of the strange visions he gets when he's close to dying. Out of nowhere, he notices Roka nearby, and it seems like she's concealing something beneath the tree's shade. Whatever the situation, its significance was obvious, and losing focus now would be a mistake. Fungo realized he had to find a way to rescue his friend. She tries to shield Roka, and it is her voice that cries out his name. Without warning, released his grip, leaving the protagonist puzzled about the reason behind the sudden change. He explains that he has already gathered everything necessary, and points out that continuing any further would disappoint Roka, especially since his actions are for her sake. Fungo hurries over to his companion. At first, it appears that remains completely still. Suddenly, his eyes flutter open. His friend looked at him with concern, wondering if he was hurt. Took a moment to examine himself, searching for any signs of injury. The protagonist pulled him into a close embrace, relief flooding through them at his survival. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the hero expressed both excitement and a heartfelt apology. Because of his actions, felt completely confused by the situation unfolding around him. Fungo expresses regret for leaving the country abruptly and without informing anyone. He pauses to recount all that has happened so far, making sure nothing is left out. After finishing his explanation, he expresses that he requires assistance. Their goal was to return and search for King Einstein. Insisted that he was only an ordinary soldier, and claimed he wasn't capable of such a task. The group discussed the recent explosion caused by the new weapon. Roka pointed out that this event showed their enemies had no intention of ending the war, even after conquering the Whale Kingdom. Found it amusing that the girl, despite being a weapon herself, refused to abandon anyone. Finds herself unable to say a word. The boy paused to consider the situation carefully. After thinking it over, he decided to return and seek out the king. Whenever he managed to solve a problem, he would. A message could simply be delivered using this protected communication method. Once he was prepared to leave, Fungo offered his friend a heartfelt farewell, hoping for a safe journey. Just before departing, the boy paused and glanced over his shoulder one final time. He claims that someday their paths will cross again. His friend completely believes him. Following these events begins his grand adventure. Meanwhile, criticizes him, insisting that should have been honest, especially considering his abilities were powerful enough to destroy the Tree of Life. Because of this, his left eye and arm are now unusable. Rain poured down heavily in the land belonging to the Edo tribe, while atop a watchtower, a soldier peered out and wondered aloud whether the snow was still clinging to the ground. Nearby, his companion made a light-hearted remark, suggesting that if the weather continued, the entire area could soon turn into an ice rink. Meanwhile, the Kingdom had unexpectedly halted its assaults, creating a glimmer of hope that with renewed effort, the Edo might succeed in regaining the territory they had lost. A new figure approached the scene, as the soldiers exchanged stories about the Holy Knights hastily retreating to their homeland. Rumors circulated that if those knights were seen, they would be completely overpowered. An armed group advanced in formation, steadily approaching the city. The man claims he can frighten them away with his axe, despite never having used one in his life. Without warning, one of the guards noticed an object rapidly approaching. The group advanced, arriving in a tank that rumbled across the ground. None of the men could identify the strange creature shifting before them. A weapon was pointed directly at their group, leaving the two guards paralyzed with uncertainty. In the next instant, an explosion engulfed them. This was the entrance to his fortress. The host announces that a generous meal has been prepared to help everyone relax after their exhausting journey. He also reassures the group that the food is completely safe, inviting them to eat alongside him without worry. Fungo explained that there was no concern, since caring was something everyone naturally did. Wondered aloud if the group truly consisted of just 3 patriots. Gain clarified that there were actually 14 members, although the rest were preoccupied with other matters at the moment. Suddenly noticing that one knight seemed out of the loop, Gain decided to inquire about their identity. In response, the patriarch removed their mask, revealing themselves as who then handed over 3 kuna. Made a light-hearted remark about the girl's surprisingly young age for someone in charge. In response, the girl explained that she became the leader after her father, who had led the tribe before her, was defeated by Roka during a fight. She freezes with her food halfway to her mouth, clearly unsettled. Concern flickers across her friend's face as she watches. Roka reveals that her companion, once known as the Emperor of Flames, died as a result of their actions. On top of that, was forced to turn against someone he cared about, all because a patriarch commanded it. Suddenly, leaps onto the tabletop, moving purposefully toward the Empress. She halts just inches from the girl's face. Her father had once explained that losing a fight wasn't a reason for resentment, but rather an opportunity to show respect, so she tried not to feel angry with. All conversation at the table comes to an abrupt halt, leaving everyone in complete silence. Believes that unless she witnesses him fighting alongside her, she cannot regard him as an ally. The girl's arms trembled with fury, while the Empress appeared thrilled, pleased that he had not only confessed but also acknowledged her correctness. The protagonist observed that his friend continued to have a large appetite, expressed his curiosity about the involvement of the Holy Knights, wanting to understand how they would be utilized. He guessed that they might be assigned to the front lines once more. However, the patriarch Anna disagreed with his assumption. She intends to address the ongoing conflict, noting that it's unlikely we'll launch another assault before spring arrives. Roka wonders about the reason for this delay. The main character suspects Roka is eager for battle, but realizes that's not the case. She simply lacks any knowledge about military tactics. Goes on to clarify that reaching her homeland is extremely difficult. The land is covered with mountains, and with winter's arrival, the only route is now hidden beneath heavy snow. Acknowledged that reaching this place had been a difficult journey. He realized that moving an entire group of soldiers through the same route would be even more challenging, particularly because they would require plenty of supplies along the way. The hope was to see the Whale Kingdom restored by the time spring arrived. To achieve this, the strategy involved dispatching the Holy Knights to the nearby realm in order to secure an alliance with them. In another part of the area, soldiers hurried through the chaos, their movements frantic and disorganized. Despite all efforts, nothing could stop the tank as it crushed everything in its path with ease. The soldiers attempted to alert the city about the impending attack, but chaos erupted as gunfire was unleashed in every direction. One by one, the warriors began to fall. With the situation growing dire, the command to retreat was given. Had arrived wielding an unfamiliar weapon, prompting the urgent need to alert everyone. Realized that the kingdom of which bordered was also an adversary. There was a glimmer of hope that this new strategy might succeed. Previous attempts at communication had led nowhere. Now, with the involvement of the Holy Knights, they hoped would reconsider their stance. The protagonist is confident that joining forces with their new allies will allow them to launch a successful pincer attack in the ongoing war. Without warning, a soldier appeared and urgently alerted everyone to the impending danger. A wave of shock rippled through the crowd as the news of the attack reached their ears. The tank unleashed a powerful blast that struck the fortress, and the resulting devastation rendered everyone silent with shock. The archers prepared themselves while the tank stood in position, ready for action. Hank finds himself under attack from every direction. Despite their efforts, it was clear that nothing they tried seemed to succeed. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. In another part of the battlefield, a new contender arrives. This time, it is the Holy Knights. At the same time, the tank remained relaxed, simply waiting to see what would happen next. Wondered aloud about the unfamiliar object, prompting his friend to speculate that it must be a newly developed weapon from. A soldier informed Gain that their arrows and axes had no effect on the strange new weapon. Couldn't shake the feeling that this entire attack seemed suspicious. Announced that she would demonstrate her skills for the new team for free. Now that she was part of the operation, she was fully committed to the action. Gain seemed more relaxed compared to the rest of the team. Roka rushed forward, gathering crackling electricity around her. A streak of lightning shot from her hand and struck the armored vehicle. The display of her power left the soldiers in awe, yet the tank remained unscathed, leaving Roka in a state of disbelief. At that moment, the new weapon began to move once more. Despite the powerful blow, the enemy remained unfazed. Volunteered to confront the infantry, assuring everyone that she would deal with the foe herself. She remained skeptical that a child could handle such a weapon. However, the girl insisted she became the tribe leader through her own accomplishments, not simply because she was the daughter of the previous chief. The twin swords had already defeated more than 100 soldiers. Carried herself with an air of boldness that couldn't be ignored. She openly challenged the Thunder Empress, demanding proof that she deserved anything from her, which only heightened Roka's uneasiness. Known as the Queen of Lightning, the Empress wasn't used to having her abilities questioned by anyone, least of all a teenager. The fortress glowed with an eerie, unsettling light, casting long, nervous shadows across the walls. Nearby, a mysterious figure concealed in the darkness watched the scene unfold through a pair of binoculars. This observer, a boy, relayed information that those who had escaped had now been located. Suddenly, another fierce bolt of lightning crashed down, striking the weapon once more. Electricity surged through the tank. Despite unleashing her most powerful move, she was unable to make any impact. The protagonist speculated that the machine's energy was likely moving through its wheels and being released into the earth. He suspected an operator was hidden inside, believing that defeating this person would secure their victory. Suggested that if the protagonist created an opening in the metal shell, lightning could be used to end the confrontation. Just then, the tank launched a. The tower was struck yet again. The destruction of the fortress happened so quickly that it seemed almost unbelievable. Rushed forward, determined to take the lead. The soldiers prepared for battle, lifting their weapons in response to the attack. They were completely overwhelmed from the very beginning. More gunshots whizzed past them. Hurled her blade with precision, striking a soldier squarely in the neck. At the same time, the man silently questioned the Thunder Empress's delay. The boy, observing the scene, realizes that having special abilities still doesn't make it easy to fight against a tank. Recognizing he has run out of options, he searches frantically through his bag, hoping to find something useful. Is part of the group as well. While the other soldiers attempted to capture him, he quickly rolled down a nearby slope and found cover behind a tree to avoid being seen. He realized that he must discover a method to weaken the enemy's weapon by introducing a flaw. Noticed a figure approaching from the distance. The newcomer, a boy, explained that he had only wandered by after witnessing the commotion. Without hesitation, the boy announced that he intended to help. Completely baffled, didn't understand what the boy meant. The boy continued, offering a device that could take down the tank. He called the object a sting, describing how one only needed to touch its tip to a surface for the detonator to activate. However, the device's drawback was that the user had to get extremely close to the intended target. Questioned the boy's motives, suspecting it might be a trap. With a chuckle, the boy insisted that someone in his situation didn't. Leaped back into the fight, catching the protagonist's attention. The protagonist signaled to, requesting that they create a diversion. Wanted to know how much more time was needed, and replied that he only required a moment. Once that was settled, the Knight of Life consented to proceed. The protagonist expressed his trust by stating that he was relying on the other person. Chooses to draw power from a nearby tree. Within moments, the surface becomes completely dry. The knight grips the weapon tightly, relying on the branches for support. At the same time, the soldiers find themselves baffled by the unfolding events. Demonstrates his ability to control non-living objects as well. The crucial development, however, is that the tank has come to a halt. Defeats additional soldiers, making way for it to move forward. All the while, the main character hurries toward the action. Moving in, they succeeded in plunging the unusual weapon into the creature's tail. The blast hurled him through the air, observed that the opening had been created. Roka summoned her abilities and unleashed a bolt of lightning, completely destroying the weapon in its path. A wounded soldier struggled to escape from the damaged tank. Witnessing Roka's strength, found himself genuinely impressed, realizing that the name Empress of Thunder truly suited her. While this unfolded, paused to catch his breath. Meanwhile, the main character concluded that defeating the king was the only chance to rescue Roka. At the same time, inside the fortress, Einstein examined the array of weapons before him. A voice remarked on the irony that in another lifetime, Einstein had been a pacifist, making it surprising to witness his current role as a purveyor of weapons and disorder. The king recalled that Einstein's original task was to offer assistance, but instead, he had disappeared without a trace. The voice explained that Einstein's true desire was to wander and discover new places. Curious, the king inquired about the general atmosphere of the planet. Meanwhile, Thomas Edison's name was introduced. In this world, the boy explains, magic dominates every kingdom, leaving science struggling to find its place. And Soldier held the woman firmly against the ground. Elsewhere, the group enjoyed glasses of fine wine from the Whale Kingdom, seemingly without a care in the world. At that same moment, an assassin hurled a knife with deadly precision, striking his mark directly in the eye. Two other men found themselves pierced by additional blades. The soldiers regarded the rebels as hopeless fools for daring to rise up, especially since their kingdom had already suffered defeat in the war. However, the warrior held a completely different view from his adversaries. Despite this, the soldiers remained irritated with him and were more than willing to fight. Sometime later, away from the village, their leader confronted the same soldiers with harsh questions. As the debriefing began, it was revealed that the Whale Kingdoms. Additionally, it was discovered that the Emperors of Thunder and Life were residing comfortably within that city. The soldiers who had just been struck turned to their commander, Bizarro Curio, eager to know what they should do next. Bizarro paused to consider their situation, weighing his options carefully. After a moment of silent reflection, he announced his decision. He intended to eliminate both emperors, and he would do so with unmatched cruelty. One of the soldiers expressed confidence, remarking that such behavior was precisely what they anticipated from their leader. Meanwhile, Bizarro emphasized the importance of completing the mission, insisting that was their main priority. The barracks would overlook everything else, so he hoped to enjoy himself as well. A soldier expressed interest in joining the activity, and the leader agreed, mentioning that his only concern was the Empress of Lightning. Taking advantage of the night, he planned to slip into the city unnoticed. The idea struck her as strange. He boasts about his team's flawless track record with missions, showing no concern about the current one. Without warning, regains consciousness. Confusion floods his mind as he tries to make sense of his surroundings, and then it hits him. His entire body aches as if he had been run over by a truck. At that instant, he becomes aware that his friend is stretched out across him. Roka is fast asleep, but the sound of his voice stirs her awake. When she realizes he's conscious, her face breaks into a bright, delighted smile. She leans in so close that their faces are mere inches apart. Roka shares the good news that fever has finally gone down, a relief since he had been unconscious for 3 days straight. Suddenly, he notices he can't move, pinned by her weight. Roka mentions that she never left his side the entire time, but the boy grows a little bashful. She reassures him there's no need to feel embarrassed, reminding him that they used to fall asleep together all. A dark figure suddenly appeared behind the guard, and swiftly knocked him unconscious before he could react. Afterward, he pulled the lifeless body and concealed it behind the wall. The soldier explained that out of the 3 fugitives, just 2 possessed divine abilities. Bizarro remains unconcerned about those matters, focusing solely on pursuing the Holy Knights and determined to defeat them on his own. Meanwhile, recalls a previous conversation in which his friend claimed that are the true villains. This revelation causes a change in Roka's demeanor. Roka reflects on her past, explaining that she has always fought loyally for her superiors since she was a child. Although fear once held her back, her desire to defend her people always outweighed it. However, everything changed dramatically when the new regime seized control of the kingdom. Listens with growing interest, wanting to learn more about her experiences. The command was clear. Every person in the Whale Kingdom, whether a soldier, a woman, or a child, was to be completely eliminated. The king's intentions were unmistakable, but Roka found himself unable to comply with such a twisted demand, regardless of the justification. To him, the king and the demon seemed equally ruthless. Edison observed, utterly baffled, that he couldn't understand how someone who claimed to be peaceful could order such violence. Einstein remembered that once he had mailed the letter to the President of the United States, it set the atomic arms race into motion. There was a possibility that he had already become a demon. Fully aware of the king's vast arsenal, the young scientist could hardly believe how intense the situation had become. Edison felt as if his greatest ambitions were finally being realized, while the pursuit of uranium research had only just begun. The king insisted that progress would be much further along if the scientist hadn't spent so much time wandering about recklessly. However, the boy pointed out that his journeys had, in fact, led to valuable discoveries. The nation was preparing to launch an invasion against the kingdom, bringing with them formidable combat abilities that set them apart. The king regarded this development with interest, finding it far more engaging than the dull and feeble Whale Kingdom he had known before. To Edison, the situation seemed deeply ironic. A person who championed peace in one world had transformed into an agent of chaos in this realm, eager to unleash destruction wherever possible. Upon learning of the king's commands, Roka and the other 5 holy knights chose to quietly disappear as well. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on everyone involved. Still, amidst all the turmoil, there was a bright spot. The protagonist was reunited with her closest friend. However, the reunion was bittersweet. Bizarro began to drool uncontrollably, unable to restrain himself when faced with his target. Thrust his weapon forward, but the assassin had closed the distance in an instant, positioning himself directly in front of him. Bizarro quickly recognized that his opponent was the runaway soldier, a realization that sent a wave of fear through Roka. However, the main character had already identified the mysterious man's true identity. The 2 opponents exchanged a rapid series of attacks, leaving the protagonist with a deep wound on his cheek. Roka prepared to launch her own assault, but stood in her path, preventing her from joining the fight. At the same time, in another location, awoke abruptly. She realizes that the footsteps echoing through the castle halls don't belong to anyone familiar, so she quickly stands up and prepares herself for a possible confrontation. The hallway remains utterly quiet as the assassin advances with another measured step. At that moment, surges ahead, moving swiftly toward the threat. She brought her sword through the air in a swift arc. The assassin swiftly grabbed her arm, leaving her frozen in disbelief. She stood frozen in disbelief until a sudden blow struck her stomach. The attackers were surprised to find she was just a child. One member of the group expressed interest in claiming her, but his companion showed no enthusiasm. However, their priority remained capturing the other holy knight. As they departed, they struggled to accept that the frail-looking girl before them was the formidable leader they had been seeking. Feels overwhelmed by the surprising strength of the assassins. At the same time, continues his intense fight against Bizarro. The protagonist soon understands that defeating his opponent will require the use of both hands. He urges Roka to strike, telling her not to worry about the consequences. However, Roka resists, unable to go through with it. The main character argues that if things continue like this, he's finished regardless, yet she remains unwilling to attack. Meanwhile, his strength is fading fast, and he knows he can't hold on much longer. Bizarro prepared to deliver a decisive strike, but before she could, the protagonist pleaded desperately for her attention, urging her to listen. Taking responsibility, he confessed that everything was his doing, acknowledged that he was to blame for her involvement in the conflict. Despite this, the protagonist implored Bizarro to direct her anger at him instead. Continued to struggle for survival. At the same time, Roka stood frozen, overwhelmed by disbelief. The boy then revealed that he had disclosed her secret to another person, which ultimately led to her capture. Blames himself for everything that is happening. Roka stood frozen, uncertain how to respond, feeling the weight of blame but unable to find the right reaction. In that instant, memories from her entire life raced through her thoughts. Roka began gathering electricity, sparks crackling around her as she prepared her next attack. Meanwhile, Bizarro himself, poised to unleash his ultimate move. The Lightning Empress summoned her mystical powers and directed a powerful blast straight at the assassin, hitting the target without hesitation. In an instant, Bizarro was struck down and destroyed permanently. The battle came to an end, leaving crumpled on the floor. Roka looked devastated, her expression full of heartbreak, yet she hurried to his side without hesitation. She quickly made sure her friend was still alive, relieved to find that he was still breathing. Roka explained to him that she had struck the assassin with her power, though unfortunately the enemy had gotten away. Unfortunately, was caught in the electric blast as well. The boy firmly maintains that all of his previous statements are honest, assuring her that he has spoken nothing but the truth. The girl appears somewhat sad. She reassured him that he wasn't to blame, since the truth had already become common knowledge. Mr. Mao had already traveled to the village, spreading word that an individual there possessed a divine gift. The boy found himself utterly bewildered by the situation. Ultimately, Roka explained that it had always been inevitable. The source of divine power lay within a person's family lineage, making it inevitable that once the king uncovered her real surname, the result would not have changed. The situation led to curiosity about the origins of Roka's family. Without warning, a piercing scream catches both of their attention. Both of them appear deeply concerned. Roka is taken aback that the assault hasn't ended yet and offers to investigate the situation. However, the girl firmly refuses to let go alone. He acknowledges the reality that one of his eyes and one of his hands are now useless, a fact he must come to terms with. Roka wonders if any remedy exists for his condition. Admits uncertainty about whether such a thing could happen, and the girl's expression turns somber at his words. He reassures her, insisting she shouldn't let it bring her down. What truly matters, he reminds her, is that they're both still here, standing side by side. After countless battles and near-death experiences, the fact that they've survived all the turmoil together is enough for him. This is the life had always hoped for, so losing another limb hardly bothers him now. He warns that if she gets injured because of his actions, he won't be able to forgive her. At the same time, a member of the group of assassins. The characters stumbled over a few branches, a typical mishap for them. One character showed interest in the situation, but the other insisted that they needed to concentrate. At last, the pair barged into the Emperor of Life's chamber. They showed no signs of worry, knowing the night inside posed little threat. Without paying attention to anything else around them, the two prepared to charge forward. A branch curled tightly around the man's neck. Both of them became ensnared by the twisting plants, making it a truly disastrous day for their hair. They rise off the ground, suspended motionless in midair. Notices the complete silence around him, and finds it suspicious that not even one scream can be heard. The most impressive thing was that he could figure out who was there without ever having to open the door. Destiny continued to unfold, while at the same time the assassins remained at work in the shadows. Despite the situation falling apart, there was no real concern. Against all odds, Bizarro had survived, leaving his friends unsettled and uncertain. However, the course of their plans had taken an unexpected turn. He focused completely on eliminating the boy before the Lightning Empress could arrive, his comp. The companion watches in disbelief, as their leader seems to be thoroughly enjoying the chaos of the fight. Outside, a soldier considered whether defying commands might be acceptable. His friends reminded him that their boss had given them permission to do as they pleased that night. The man was secretly making plans to go after the patriarchs. His group hoped to gain recognition, fearing they would be expelled if they failed. Unaware of the danger lurking nearby, none of them realize an ambush is about to unfold. The assassin's blade cut through the air in a swift motion. The invaders leaped back, clearly surprised and unprepared for what was happening. At the same time, the attackers seemed to believe they were far more capable than they actually were. The character moved aimlessly, seemingly unconcerned about anything that might occur. In that instant, they noticed that the person before them is Gaines. Wielding a huge axe, he had earned a legendary reputation for the havoc he caused wherever he went. The assassin didn't mind sacrificing an arm if it meant reeling in a valuable prize. However, a voice from behind interrupted, making it clear that the prize he sought wasn't available to him. The man has no chance to respond before a massive hammer comes crashing down and flattens him instantly. Without warning, the assassins found themselves encircled by the very people they had intended to attack. Their original strategy had been to retrieve the. They had tried to handle the situation step by step, yet now everything had spiraled into complete chaos. The crowd buzzed with excitement, their anticipation for the impending fight clearly visible. At the same time, Bizarro instructed his friend to gather the remaining members of their group. However, the initial individuals they discover have already lost consciousness. The leader struggled to comprehend how defeat had come at the hands of the Emperor of Life. The group initially believed their target lacked any real experience, but quickly realized they had completely underestimated them. At that moment, a cry for help suddenly pierced the air. A young man bursts into the room. He longed for his captain to come to his rescue. Questioned why the others remained indoors, while the soldier explained that they had hoped to show their worth. However, their efforts were undone when the patriarchs arrived and caused chaos. The captain and his partner stood in disbelief, amazed at how poorly the recruits were performing. Footsteps resonated through the hallway, filling the corridor with their rhythmic sound. The invaders found themselves completely encircled. There was no escape. Wanted to know which group they were part of, but the newcomer just looked puzzled, believing he was already with the victors. At that moment, Bizarro manages to draw the boy's focus. The captain then inquires whether the boy understands the reason behind their impressive success rate, prompting the young man to assume it's due to their exceptional strength. Despite the challenges, they persist relentlessly, willing to endure anything to see the mission through to completion. They showed no concern for those who were hurt or lost, believing that anyone could easily be substituted. The captain's friend remarked on how toughness seemed almost unbelievable, then pointed out that if they gave up at this point, they would be taken captive, but questioning would still come afterward. Bizarro wondered aloud if the kid was prepared to take on another task. He felt that the fun had lasted long enough, and now the moment had come to face the consequences. The young man appeared carefree, savoring the moment, while Bizarro's condition left no doubt that he was nearing death. There was no choice left for him that day. Trapped in his predicament, he saw no escape from the trouble surrounding him. The soldier, regardless of his feelings, had no choice but to confront the situation. Bizarro expressed his reluctance to harm a fellow comrade, while another urged him to seize the chance to build his reputation. Seeing no other way out, the young man rushed forward on his own. Watched his reckless move and thought to herself that he was foolish for trying to take on the fight alone. On his way, he suddenly lets go of the sword, and it falls from his grasp. He ripped off his clothes, exposing a hidden bomb underneath. The man charged toward the group, and suddenly the hallway erupted in an explosion. Stepped in front of Roka, attempting to protect her from harm. Despite his efforts, both of them were forcefully ejected from the fortress. Bizarro admitted to himself that their opponents had shown more strength than he had expected, as his companion wondered aloud if it was finally time to use the weapon for an attack. The commander claimed to have taken these toys from the king, believing their unpredictable power could bring the sword war to an end. For the moment, though, he decided to retreat and gather his forces before launching another attack. At the king's castle, the general received the latest updates. He expressed his frustration, longing for the war to be over, yet acknowledged that the king seemed determined to prolong the conflict. Nearby, one of his soldiers pointed out that the people were growing increasingly dissatisfied with the ongoing war. The general openly admitted that the kings had lost control. Once the Holy Knights were defeated, the group set their sights on their next target, Einstein. The commander approached the king, expressing concern that something seemed amiss. He cautioned Einstein against lingering so openly without protection, noting how dangerous the situation was. Even within the capital, threats persisted, and assassins could be lurking nearby, making vigilance essential. At that moment, the general noticed something unusual beneath his foot. He realized he had stepped on a concealed device. The king issued a grave warning. If the general moved, he would not survive, as the area was riddled with explosive mines. Shock registered clearly on the general's face. Einstein explained that the mine beneath him was designed to maim, but this particular device would launch hundreds of compressed iron balls in every direction if triggered. The soldier acknowledged that this was another one of recoils in alarm, stumbling backward as the grenade suddenly launches into the air. The king forbade the use of the word fake, causing the man to erupt with anger. Amidst the swirling smoke left by the outburst, an unfamiliar silhouette emerged, drawing the king's attention. The newcomer stepped out from the haze and remarked that the imposter king was starting to settle comfortably into his position. The figure, however, feels a deep sense of sadness about this. Einstein suddenly realizes the identity of the mysterious figure. The figure moves forward, setting off yet another blast. The king trembles in disbelief as the stranger reveals that every weapon before him dates back to World War II. Fear tightening his voice, the king insists that his people possess only outdated technology, yet the mysterious figure remains unmoved and refuses to tolerate any justifications. Everything he said seemed insincere. In the real world, everyone recognizes Einstein as a brilliant mind. The king attempts to claim that he himself possesses true intelligence. The man insisted that anything false would always remain false, and that was the reason he believed he needed to disappear from this world. At that moment, King Einstein's life comes to an end. The king collapsed to the ground, his voice trembling as he pleaded desperately for his father and his loyal servant. The master pondered aloud, questioning the reasons behind everything that was unfolding. Although just a week had passed, snowflakes were already falling from the sky. They observed that if the situation continued in this manner, would be unable to sustain the invasion. However, what bothered them most was knowing that their own path forward would become even more difficult. Gain proposed that the group travel to the kingdom of in hopes of forming an alliance. However, believed it was wiser to leave quickly, especially after the events of the previous night. The warrior informed them that who had been attacked would survive her injuries, but she would no longer be able to fight. With their military weakened, the group decided to retreat to the main city. Just then, Roka appeared, dressed in new clothing, and asked for opinions on her appearance. She explained that the outfit came from the whale country and was meant to provide warmth. Remarked that while she looked warm, the outfit did not seem particularly suited for combat, which made Roka realize she still felt a bit cold. He remarks that the outfit suits her flawlessly, as if it had been custom designed just for her. Turning to for confirmation, he finds the boy too stunned to respond, while the girl's face lights up with happiness from the praise. Expressed to the boy that he should no longer view her solely as a friend from his childhood. As preparations for the journey wrapped up, the reindeer stood patiently ready to depart. Found herself utterly captivated by the majestic animals. Curious, the girl wondered aloud about their identity, prompting Gain to explain that these were reindeer, renowned for their incredible strength and agility. Fungo, amazed by their appearance, admitted he had never encountered such creatures before and questioned whether they were native to the whale kingdom. The reply was a clear denial. The group explained that reindeer had roamed the land for more than a century, first brought into the region by the god. Hearing this, the protagonist's interest in the mysterious name grew even stronger. Added that these tales were part of local folklore, recounting how the Gain mentions that tales like these are shared in other lands as well. Although Roka feels prepared to set off, the warrior cautions her that these creatures are not ordinary horses, so she should dismount. Quietly hopes the other sacred magic users will arrive soon and be treated kindly, but a mysterious voice insists they will not leave without her. Roka's curiosity grows as she wonders about the identity of the small snowman in front of her. Takes offense at this, proudly reminding everyone that she is the tribe chief and relishes every chance to say it. Still feeling the sting of her recent defeat, is eager for a second chance, but Roka insists that someone like would only hold them back. Jane, who isn't enthusiastic about the plan, wishes will bring some real help to the team. Could only hope for a good outcome as their journey began. Fast forward a month beneath the looming structure of Fortress, a conversation unfolded about who had become separated from his search group. A soldier pointed out how embarrassing that must have been for. The memory struck him that had once shared a class with the infamous traitor, prompting him to speculate if had any useful information. However, had already distanced himself from the discussion. Seizing the moment, announced that he would be returning to the front lines, this time heading south, which startled his companion. His friend expressed alarm, warning that the current battles were raging in that very direction, after years of. The relaxed atmosphere faded away following Ji's unexplained death, and now was taking advantage of the situation to push its territory further south. Without warning, anxiety washed over as he began to worry about what might happen to him. As they traveled along the road, silently questioned how much farther they had to go before reaching. Noted that a whole month had passed since they had swapped hyenas for horses. Since they were avoiding troops by sticking to the outer paths, estimated it would only take a few more days before they arrived at the border. Wondered aloud about the strength of army, explaining that her own kingdom had never encountered them before. Replied, mentioning that, to his knowledge, was well known for fighting alongside animals such as horses and elephants. Without warning, a sound echoes along the path, catching the group's attention. Roka's curiosity is piqued as he tries to figure out the source of the noise. The group begins to speculate anxiously, questioning whether they might be under attack by an enemy. A massive aircraft soared swiftly across the sky. The group stared in shock, completely unsettled by what they saw overhead. Felt certain that the creature wasn't a bird at all. To make matters worse, it was moving directly toward the Whale King. Could not hide her anxiety as she worried about the mysterious threat heading toward her homeland. Roka urged her to set aside her concerns and concentrate on their current mission. The wisest choice was to exit the forest and make their way to. Silently wished that speaking with the kingdom's leaders would help them avoid any surprise attacks. Observes that none of their efforts to negotiate have ever received a response. Meanwhile, Roka comes to the conclusion that may interpret their presence as something dangerous. A new sound echoed through the forest, hinting at another possible danger. Roka grew increasingly anxious as a gigantic beast, with 3 heads suddenly emerged before them. And had never witnessed. None of them had ever seen something so massive before. The creature towered over them, its size alone making it obvious they were intruders here. Suddenly, one of the beast's heads snapped forward, aiming straight for Ro. Attempts to caution her. The creature seized her horse, which sent Roka falling. As she plummeted, shifted into his animal shape and intercepted her just in time, preventing her from crashing to the earth. However, the animal is not as fortunate. Insisted that escaping was their sole chance. Despite this, Roka pleaded with him to confront the creature instead. Reluctantly, his companion agreed to stay and face the threat. Because she had been the one to ask, summoned his abilities. The branches reached out, attempting to ensnare the remaining monsters. The knight admits he can barely maintain his hold. With the opportunity open, Roka steps forward to attack. The holy knight channels her rage into a powerful assault. The creature was jolted by a surge of electricity. Roka had used up all his energy, and the girl was just as exhausted. Lightning surged through the monster's body, causing it to collapse to the ground, utterly vanquished. Despite their victory in the battle, Roka found himself unable to move. Just then, a group of horses thundered onto the scene, noticed them before anyone else. The knight wondered aloud if these newcomers belonged to the army. Clarified that they hailed from the Whale Kingdom and were seeking a meeting with the nation's leaders. The knight insists that the abilities everyone witnessed actually belong to the soldiers of, making it impossible for her to place her trust in them. Remains completely in the dark about her true nature. Meanwhile, announces his presence as an envoy from the Whale Kingdom, yet the woman shows no interest in his explanation. She moves with remarkable speed and agility. Steps in just in time, shielding him from harm. Upon catching sight of the woman, the protagonist began to question the nature of the country he had entered. After encountering a 3-headed monster, he now faced yet another peculiar situation. The woman began to ascend the tree, catching his attention as he realized she possessed both wings and hooves. She soared through the air, moving with incredible speed that no one else could match. Despite this, rushed toward her, determined to catch up. Yet the warrior stood firm, refusing to be overpowered. Roka felt stunned by the girl's incredible speed. Confidently, the girl boasted about her ability to keep up with their opponent. She launches another assault, her blade narrowly missing its target and forcing the warrior to retreat. Regaining her confidence, the warrior charges toward once more. As they clash, the woman insists she is no monster, simply a human like everyone else. Finds herself driven backward, but she reaches out and snatches a branch, using it as a shield against the incoming blade. Let her weapons fall to the ground as her friends stared at her in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief. As leaps through the air, she grabs hold of the attacker's arm. She traps her with her legs, forming a tight triangle around her opponent. Both of them plummeted from the tree together. During their descent, the woman warned that was about to crash into the ground. Quickly retorted, pointing out that the woman's own neck would snap too. The chimera found itself with no options left, while Plumper stood by, unwavering. She found herself trapped, unable to find a way out. Reminded her that only by staying strong could she hope to get away. At the same time, pointed out how dangerous this plan really was. She halts herself at the very last moment. The warrior lifted both individuals high above the ground. As she glanced upward, she saw a sharp blade pointing directly at her eye, assured her that harming her was not his intention. She relaxed and paid attention as the group continued their conversation. Announces that she carries an official letter addressed to the king of the kingdom. The woman let out a dismissive scoff, convinced that there was no benefit in associating with a feeble nation such as the Whale Kingdom. Confident in her people's abilities, she believed they were perfectly capable of managing on their own. Wanted to know her position, and she replied that she worked as a border guard. He clarified that his purpose was to meet with the leaders, and she admitted that she wasn't the spokesperson for her entire nation. This made her pause and consider his words. Eventually, she decided to go along with his request. With that settled, she prepared herself to take the. They climbed onto their horses and set off on their journey. As they traveled, his attention was drawn to the woman riding ahead of him. He found himself particularly interested in her hooves and wanted to know which land she called home. Explained that her kingdom kept many secrets, and outsiders knew very little about it, which only made the group more eager to learn. However, suggested that someone else should explain further details. At that point, questioned her about the reason she was standing watch within its borders. The woman explains that the existence of a hidden agreement between the kingdoms is unknown to most. Although, and have long been rivals, their aggression toward the Whale Kingdom led to a brief truce. Roka understands that her homeland sought this pause to gain an advantage over their adversaries. Surrendered a portion of territory to, hoping to secure 5 years without conflict. Noticed that their foes seemed overly sure that the Whale Kingdom would collapse quickly. The woman admitted she was on the verge of defeat, which would bring the agreement to an end. However, their true intention all along was to use that time to strengthen their nation. This indicated that during that period, they had been gathering a force of creatures, similar to the ones the group had already encountered. Without warning, the woman transformed before their eyes and urged the group to move faster, leaving everyone bewildered by what they had just witnessed. She brushed off any concerns, insisting that they hurry. It soon became clear that she was actually a mix of several different animals. Noticed a kitten nearby and gently picked it up, curious about its origin. Suddenly, someone called out to him, interrupting the moment. The squad leader demanded an explanation for why one of his soldiers was distracted by a cat. Attempted to justify his actions, but the leader remained unconvinced. Despite this, continued as before, which only made the soldier more anxious. In his distraction, he had carelessly left his weapon lying on the ground. The leader informs him that they are preparing to launch an attack on. He silently wishes that the new weapon will work smoothly, without causing too many problems. The crowd responded in unison, their voices ringing out in agreement. The others explained that both the general and the king were missing, leaving the capital in a state of turmoil. It seemed that was unaware of this fact. At the castle once again, someone inquired whether he had any desire to claim the throne. Edison feels overwhelmed by the idea of being responsible for bringing an entire kingdom back to its former glory, believing he is far too young for such a task. All of the chaos had started because of the false ruler. The man cautioned that if they weren't vigilant, might end up victorious in the conflict. Responded with indifference, admitting the nation no longer mattered to him. The stranger then declared that if the young man refused to claim the throne, he would seize it himself. This led to a curiosity about the type of world this individual aimed to build. The name evoked images of a place torn by conflict and hopelessness. The man wondered aloud how the boy might react if he encountered a child in need, and Edison responded that he would offer assistance. He was suddenly pushed forward, causing him to land awkwardly on the throne. The mysterious figure encourages him to trust in his own abilities and have faith in himself. The journey continued onward, moving beyond the boundaries of the forest. As they prepared to cross the border, uncertainty hung in the air about whether the group would be allowed to depart once inside. Insisted they needed to return to their own land. She pointed out that, at the very least, they could try sending a message, but warned that any resistance could land them behind bars, and not in a pleasant way. Acknowledged that there was no other option, they simply had to press on. The woman interrupts, making it clear that retreat is no longer possible. She explains that the forest has already been thrown into chaos. The group stared in disbelief as the wild creatures lounged calmly before them, each one displaying a bizarre and unique appearance. The observer found themselves curious about the identity of these soldiers. They appeared as animals, yet something about them seemed unmistakably human. people referred to them as. The woman clarified that, while they possessed human intelligence, their most impressive qualities came from animals. As a result, the characteristics of weapons failed to intimidate anyone. Stood with her team when a voice from the group wondered aloud about the identity of their unexpected visitors. Catching sight of the manager among them couldn't hide her astonishment. The newcomers, appearing both inquisitive and unsure, seemed determined to understand the situation. Clarified for everyone that these individuals had come as messengers. Upon hearing this, one of the newcomers expressed their excitement at the role. Curious, inquired further about their identities. Revealed that the messengers were actually her parents. The man with hair then stepped forward and introduced himself as Charles. At the same time, the assassins discover that both the king and the general have been killed. They begin to discuss whether this event might ignite a civil war. Bizarro considered whether the soldiers had disappeared as well, but the man offered no information about their whereabouts. The main point of concern became whether the group would pursue the Holy Knights, but Bizarro insisted that they would not. His main concern centered on how often he succeeded. Another soldier returned from his assignment, reporting that their forces were being singled out. The target quietly entered the country and connected with the people in charge. One of the boys pointed out that, and had recently gotten into a spanking incident. Removed his food from the flames. He decided to use the war dog's keen senses to help him locate the people he was searching for. Mentions that once they get through the woods, the city will be next. Meanwhile, seems completely in tune with the atmosphere. From this vantage point, the sprawling cityscape of capital came into view. He considers whether bringing these people to the emperor could be dangerous, while insists he can trust his instincts about others. His companion remains uneasy, believing the plan is risky, though reassures him with his calm demeanor. Interrupts to ask if they are responsible for creating the monstrous soldiers. One of them confirms it, but feels that the hero's question sounded a bit disrespectful. The hero's curiosity centered on discovering the secret behind their success. Grigo brought up the controversial subject of genetics, calling it the real issue at hand. Meanwhile, couldn't make sense of what was being said, feeling more puzzled than ever. The man went on to clarify that, in their society, those kinds of experiments were strictly forbidden. Goes on to clarify that, despite the increased complexity. Although the situation felt uncertain, the group knew they needed to rescue their nation. For instance, there was the Kingdom of the Whale, a place so defenseless that it stood no chance of resisting. Overcome by a mix of emotions, thought about how hard they always fought, giving it their all, but realized it was pointless. Held the advantage with their scientists and control over genetics. The Kingdom of the Whale could not measure up to others in any way. Grigo pointed out that this made them a powerless nation. Quickly defended her homeland, feeling insulted by the remark. Stepped in to apologize, assuring her that he believed there were many decent people living there. Observes that people speak as though each nation possesses a unique atmosphere. His mind drifts back to a memory from a year earlier, recalling words her father had spoken. A man in a wolf costume managed to defeat 2 soldiers simultaneously. The soldiers, witnessing his skill in battle, chose to abandon the fight and flee. He held the title of the Twin Blades of. As his daughter looked on with amazement, one of the soldiers remarked that he had once again prevented an enemy invasion. He felt no desire to comply. Their true objective was to press forward and eliminate every holy knight in their path. A soldier recalled how, during their previous attempt, the entire squad had been defeated with a single strike. The leader advises the group to let go of any resentment. He explains that magical abilities once existed in that place. Stood frozen in shock, unable to process what she had just heard. Her father explained calmly that he held no resentment toward the previous leader responsible for their banishment. He compared the situation to the destiny of thunder, which would eventually befall them as well. Because of this, he insisted that they had to act, or else their kingdom would be destroyed. Attempted to reassure her father that she would follow his lead. He gently rests his hand atop her head. She explains that her responsibility has become safeguarding the village. The girl remains confused, unable to grasp his point. The man bowed low, assuring everyone that he would return accompanied by the Holy Knights. At that moment, she recalls that these abilities are knots. The group soon reached their destination, where noticed how extremely dark the area was. Assured everyone that he would make sure stayed awake, even if it meant giving him a couple of light slaps. The group stood together in the hallway, patiently waiting. Everyone seemed a bit concerned. The door suddenly swung wide, opening into the room. Both men indicate that they are ready to take action at this moment. The interior also stretches out with impressive size. Stands in awe, completely amazed by what he sees. The emperor turned out to be just a child, and his name was. He was actually younger than. Grigo revealed that became ruler after his father died unexpectedly early. Darby, behaving cautiously, explained that he had kept this information hidden from other nations, but now he was choosing to confide in the group. Because the emperor was still a child, these loyal followers had become his most trusted and devoted protectors. Had already figured everything out, realizing that those two were the true leaders behind it all. It seemed that, despite everything, his initial impression hadn't been a complete disaster. Although no one else realizes it, he is fully aware that they are completely encircled. An uneasy tension seems to drift from the shadows behind the pillars. Prepared to reveal the king's bold opinion, announcing that their kingdom would only ally with them if everyone proved their impressive abilities in the imminent war. Meanwhile, appeared completely confused by the entire conversation. Grigo believed that they needed to demonstrate their value. Roka wondered aloud whether these statements truly reflected the emperor's intentions. The group emphasized that refusing the conditions would mean the alliance was off the table. Urged everyone not to dwell on the details, reminding them that they were already being pursued. At that moment, exchanged a glance with. The main character expressed a preference to spend a relaxed evening with his friends before making any decisions. Because of the situation, the scientist offers them a place to stay in one of the rooms. At the same time, along the southern border of near the protective barrier. At that moment, and were clashing near the borders because of an old conflict. The area, however, remained strictly off-limits to any military presence. The situation had changed, and now each side was preparing for what was to come. Struggled to understand why the kingdoms continued to fight over such a small piece of territory. His friend clarified that any sign of weakness from one side would only encourage the other to demand even more. One of the soldiers made a light-hearted remark, suggesting that the updated weapons would make the upcoming battle much easier. The group also speculated that Edison could become the next king. There were whispers circulating, suggesting that someone without a drop of royal lineage might have a chance at claiming the throne. A surprising idea, even if it was only hearsay. Although rumors circled, most believed it had been a noble who decided that fate. The soldier found the situation utterly absurd, unable to comprehend how someone so young could possess such immense power. Edison sat relaxed on the throne, his crown resting confidently on his head. The boy recalled his journeys across different countries, coming to the conclusion that the former king was more disappointing than anyone else he had ever encountered. At the same time, had made significant advancements through his studies in genetics, greatly increasing his influence and authority as a ruler. Edison, now wearing the crown atop his head, found himself completely absorbed in the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. Lost in thought, the object unexpectedly slips from the boy's grasp and shatters on the floor. He gazes down at what he had been carrying, stunned by what happened. He stood frozen in disbelief, his heart aching with the simple desire to earn his father's approval. He realizes that victory isn't necessary for him. His only goal is to eliminate as many opponents as possible. Returning to the negotiation table, it was pointed out that the Whale Kingdom would be doomed if the agreement fell through. Seemed willing to go ahead with the exams if the choice was left to her. For a long time, Roka had been preparing themselves mentally. Meanwhile, looked prepared to face his former teammates head-on. Is eager to reveal a shocking secret. She pondered her own theory that the sacred powers of may not truly be theirs. Remembering how her father had dropped subtle hints about this possibility, she decided to visit the library for answers. During her search, she stumbled upon a reference that was incredibly unclear. The truth emerged that the genuine sacred knights hailed from the Whale Kingdom, and this astonishing discovery stunned everyone present. Explained that in ancient times, a figure known as Faust served as an apostle of the gods in the Whale Kingdom. He possessed the extraordinary ability to generate fire, flames, and lightning, as well as command the forces of storms, which gave him an undeniable sense of authority and power. In those days, people referred to such powers as magic. Roka understood the strength she referred to, and his friend nodded in agreement. Points out that while the specifics are unclear, the documents are authentic. Rumor has it that the patriarchs banished magic from the land, leaving behind only their names as a reminder. In the Whale Kingdom, children received names that combined the names of their villages with those of their parents. For instance, someone from the village of whose father was named would end up with a name reflecting both. This naming tradition left her confused about her own identity. His curiosity was piqued as he wondered about the origins of the sacred knight's titles. The Empress of Thunder explained that she came into the world in Rome, and her mother's name was a name blended with Roca. Grew more anxious as he listened to the theory unfold. Meanwhile, appeared puzzled, unable to understand why the wizard's descendants all shared the same name. Finds herself unable to respond to that question. Points out that sharing the same bloodline does not necessarily make them true descendants. There was a possibility that the agreement might require a blood pact, and naturally, this would come with the drawback of a vulnerability to magic. Such terms could prove to be quite challenging. There could be a hereditary connection, tracing back to the first wizard who bestowed their abilities. Roca came to understand that his companion was already familiar with the theory about powers. The knight recalled how his own parents had once told him something much like this. He then revealed that his grandmother was actually a direct descendant of the very first wizard. It was said that she secretly escaped from the Kingdom of Wales and spent her days living in disguise as a refugee. After discovered her abilities, she was immediately dispatched to the front lines, wondered aloud if she had experienced something similar. Roca explained that his father came from and admitted he had never known his mother. Each person carried their own history, but none chose to reveal their secrets amid the chaos of war. Sensing the tension, attempted to change the subject. She returned and remarked that serving the Whale Kingdom was far from an average job. Found himself in full agreement with her assessment. The knight then announced that the group would take on mission as they were comrades in arms. Reminded everyone that they needed to prepare for the possibility of clashing with old allies from the battlefield. With that, revealed a strategy, one designed to unite both the Whale Kingdom and in harmony. Rows of soldiers stood in formation. They moved forward with the unity and determination of a legendary army. Reports that is dispatching 5,000 troops to the border. With an army of 2,000 soldiers and 500 preparing to fight for the very first time, everyone silently hoped that the upcoming battle would unfold without any complications. Everything was unfolding without trouble. The crucial point was that both parties insisted their actions were motivated by a desire to protect the nation. Everyone in the room turned as a voice rose above the chatter, calling for silence. Stepped forward, announcing the group's agreement to the proposed alliance terms. Feels a surge of excitement upon hearing the news. Although the protagonist hopes to organize teams for the upcoming challenge, his proposal receives approval. Light filled the room as the scientist shifted the conversation to a different subject, directing attention to his injured eye and arm. The young man is taken by surprise, realizes that he had hoped to keep this vulnerability hidden. He mentioned that although the chances were slim, a possible cure could exist. They found themselves in a hidden chamber beneath the ground, where expressed his appreciation for the new partnership taking shape. Found himself curious about the destination of the tunnel ahead. The scientist reassures him, emphasizing that the priority is returning the protagonist to the fight. The scientist adds that the process will be quick. After what feels like an endless wait, the group reaches their destination as a heavy metal door creaks open before them. The doors swung wide, exposing an enormous laboratory brimming with various experiments. Inside the tubes, living creatures could be seen. In reality, their numbers reached into the hundreds. Numerous experiments and research projects were spread out in all directions. The laboratory stretches out with impressive size, yet tucked away in the rear, an unusual sight catches the eye. Several strange creatures, bound by heavy chains, hung helplessly against the wall. Stomach churns as the foul odor overwhelms him. Blood pours from the slain creatures, streaming across the floor before disappearing into the drain. The protagonist insists that such an act is sacrilegious, yet stands firm, refusing to agree. The gods permitted this outcome, leading humanity to develop through their quickness. All individuals experience this stage at some point in their lives. Survival could be traced back to that very reason. The main character felt confused about the direction of the conversation, unable to see the point being made. According to the Greeks, their actions were meant to express thankfulness. He traded his ineffective arm for something far more impressive. The hero stands in stunned silence, unable to find words. demonstrates his abilities by not just producing warriors, but also restoring their health. Any ineffective limbs or organs are replaced with improved, more efficient versions. Attempts to insist that he can handle things on his own, yet uncertainty lingers. It remains to be seen whether the hero, as he is now, can truly shield the people who matter most to him. It seemed possible that, in his present condition, he was unable to participate in the conflict, and perhaps he was not yet prepared in his mind to give up everything for the sake of winning. Wondered about their intentions, questioning why they would offer him additional power without asking for anything in return. At this moment, the most important thing was that they stood together, united by a common cause, and required assistance to succeed in the imminent fight. No one would pressure the protagonist. The decision would rest solely in their hands. Appeared unsure, yet his gaze drifted toward someone who stood out even more. With resolve shining in their eyes, they watched as a door abruptly flew open. The trio of explorers leaped into action. Expressed regret for arriving late, while Grigo promised that they would support in the coming fight. Roka, however, demanded to know whereabouts. The only explanation given was that couldn't be reached at the moment. Grigo clarified that was currently in surgery to repair damage to his spleen, which stunned Roka. Tried to reassure everyone, saying their friend would return to join the battle once he had recovered. The girl silently wished that would be the case. Meanwhile, grew suspicious about the nature of this supposed surgery, realizing it was far from ordinary. 10 days had passed since the event. Using binoculars, observed the imposing enemy troops. Despite this, his companion. The soldiers remained protected within their trenches, equipped with powerful machine guns. Because of this, he feels confident that they will return home earlier than planned. However, suspects that their opponents are already preparing a counter-strategy. From the mountain's peak, an unseen observer keeps a close eye on the group below. The group of heroes stood together. The group notices that the fight is on the verge of starting. Roka silently wishes for strategy to succeed. He realizes there's no way to find out unless they try. Everything depends on the choice the makes, yet remains determined to pay her no attention. Its only purpose is to watch over the group, not to assist them, and firmly shows that she doesn't want any support from her. The beast woman feels discouraged since she was only trying to be playful, but is clearly upset. Instructed the group to prepare themselves and get ready to leave. The soldiers brimmed with excitement as they prepared for the upcoming battle. The tense atmosphere of the standoff unsettled, who couldn't understand why everyone remained motionless. His friend explained that everyone was holding back, waiting for someone else to act first. Deep down, wished that nobody would do anything reckless. Suddenly, an unusual sound reached his ears, and the rest of the soldiers noticed it as well. Alarmed, one of them called out that something was soaring overhead. The group watched as mysterious beings glided above, transporting more monstrous creatures through the air. Stared in awe, completely overwhelmed by what she saw. Suddenly, the monsters came crashing down, landing squarely on her head. At the same time, the soldiers remain motionless, taking cover in their hiding spots. Shock ripples through the group, as their leader shouts a command for them to begin shooting. The soldiers dashed toward the machine guns, but disaster struck when one of them was suddenly smashed. That monstrous being had transformed the fighter and handed him over. The mixture turned into soup. His friend shouted desperately, urging everyone to escape. Without warning, a spray of blood landed on his face. A creature with 2 heads was busily chewing on his conch shell. And T remained behind. His troops found themselves helplessly crushed beneath the enormous feet of towering giants. At the same time, the 2-headed creature had consumed all of his companions without making a single sound. The monstrous being moved heavily in his direction. The young boy steadied himself, preparing for whatever might happen next. Just in the nick of time, someone fired a shot at the creature. The beast's gaze shifted, now fixed on the source of the disturbance. Even couldn't hide her shock as a line of tanks thundered onto the scene, arriving just in time to save the day. Suddenly, the roar of cannon fire erupted. The king's elite armored squad made their entrance, their cannons firing in rapid succession. The next blow struck the giants with perfect accuracy. From far away, additional cannons began to fire, joining in the bombardment. The battlefield erupted in a powerful explosion. The tanks surged forward at maximum speed. A commander relayed that the giants had fallen, but his words were cut short as an enormous shadow suddenly cast over him. With a powerful swing, the creature brought its iron mace crashing down onto the tank. At the same time, became alert to a different sound nearby. Something shot overhead, moving so quickly it seemed to leap through the air with the speed of lightning. For a brief moment, he imagined they might be horses. The thunder of artillery in the distance signaled the approach of something ominous. The attackers were revealed to be the... Wielding his sword, he cut effortlessly through the ranks of soldiers, his blade moving with astonishing ease. Nearby, one of the soldiers scrambled to draw his own weapon, desperation flickering in his eyes. Without warning, the beastman disappeared from sight. The soldier struggles to match the swift pace set before him. Suddenly, a second creature emerges from behind, catching him off guard. The attack sliced through him as easily as if he were made of paper. The battalion had already seized control of the battlefield. The leader believed that, at their current pace, the team would finish the battle quickly. Stared in disbelief, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing, as nothing in his experience had ever prepared him for this moment. Back at the castle, events continued to unfold. The newly crowned king stood alongside several of his commanders. Many believed that his armored unit, though limited in size, proved to be remarkably powerful during combat. On the field, those individuals carried more influence than even the holy knights in the eyes of others. Fueled by ambition, a commander began plotting to seize total authority over the entire kingdom. Edison considers the idea and thinks that making such a move requires a lot of courage. Even as the conversation continued around him, the king brought up an incident in the Whale Kingdom where a holy knight had destroyed one of their tanks. The commander explains that it is his responsibility to address the consequences of that setback. Edison quickly notices that after the death of the previous king, the soldiers begin to reveal their true intentions. The commanders hoped for divine favor upon the throne, which led him to seek the promotion of the four to the rank of general. Edison realizes that this will make them the greatest source of trouble imaginable. The world shifted once more, returning to the chaos of the battlefield. From afar, the crew observes the unfolding chaos. Observed entering the chaos and assumed he was now part of the battle. Roka felt confident, believing his friend's strategy was unfolding just as intended. As noticed several vehicles assembling below, he suspected that one of the four commanders must be present. The Thunder Empress sprang into action, declaring that her focus was locked on a particular individual. Meanwhile, wondered aloud about the meaning of the term, commander. The general oversaw the army, while the king personally directed the armored divisions. The group may be small in number, yet they are extremely powerful, and Roka believes these leaders are truly wicked at heart. They showed no compassion, and failed to notice when their foes gave up. No one, not even children, was spared. He had witnessed the group's power firsthand, observing as they swept through the area and ensured that no survivors remained. All the commanders were fiercely loyal to King, willing to sacrifice their lives for him, which left no one brave enough to oppose his rule. Declares her intention to confront the man on her own. Pointed out that the group's leaders expected to see progress soon. Tried to reassure her, telling her not to worry about it. However, Roka believed that things wouldn't be so easy for them. The commander remained closely flanked by guards carrying powerful weapons, making it extremely difficult to spot any opportunity to get close. The armored unit stood ready to block anyone who dared approach, warned that they had no intention of peacefully joining the Whale King. Stood on the verge of conquering the entire world, assured the group that she would take care of her responsibilities before returning. Roka remarked on how outrageously arrogant was behaving, nodded in agreement, reminding everyone that they had already chosen to face all possible dangers, began to instruct them on what to do next. Everyone prepared themselves as a massive bird descended from the sky, carrying a basket meant for their journey. The beast woman pleaded with the monster, begging it to claim her. They took the items, at the same time within the Guardians. The main character notices a lifeless body. Found himself standing beneath a tree, slowly coming to the realization that everything around him was part of a dream. He spotted a girl in the distance and immediately assumed she was Roka. Without warning, a man appeared just behind him. He had no idea where he was, yet the boy. He had died, and now an unfamiliar sensation washed over him. In a different world and a different existence, appears clad in brand new armor. The boy's eyes fall upon his assembled troops. Becomes aware that he is about to face a confrontation. In the midst of the chaos, the boy abruptly opened his eyes. He appeared as though he had just awakened from a long, heavy sleep. Perhaps he had simply been trapped in a bad dream. As he attempted to rise, he became aware that something was happening. His arm began to shift. He heard a voice telling him to relax for a moment, yet the room was empty. It felt as if an invisible presence lingered nearby, like a ghost silently watching. The voice informed him that it had been instructed to eliminate, acting as his hand while spiraling out of control. Soon after, the protagonist discovered the source of the voice. Reached out and closed his fingers around an unseen object, relying on touch rather than sight to guide him. A startled response from an unseen presence revealed its surprise at being discovered. In an instant, a young boy materialized before, his ability to blend seamlessly into his surroundings reminiscent of a chameleon. This encounter brought back memories of the elusive feeling he had sensed earlier in the king's chamber. The boy casually inquired about his well-being, prompting the protagonist to reply that he appeared to be all right. The protagonist struggled with performing precise actions, yet there was a chance he could wield a sword effectively. At the same time, the boy mentioned he had been asleep for 10 days without waking. The Beast Boy revealed that his companions were already fighting on the battlefield, then announced that he needed to go join them. Someone entered the room and reassured him that there was no need to worry. Noted the lack of recent news from the battlefield, leaving everyone uncertain about what was happening there. Despite this, remained determined to locate Roka, feeling an urgent need to find him. Before anything else, the scientist expressed concern over his injured arm and wanted to examine it. Carefully, began to remove the bandages wrapped around the protagonist's wound. The hero immediately senses that something is wrong. Although the scientist reports that the hero's body seems to be adapting, no one really understands the hero's true capabilities. Demands an explanation for their actions. Grigo reveals that they are experimenting with an untested method. Because it would have been impossible to try this on just anyone, was chosen to be the test subject. Anxiety floods the protagonist, but casually admits he left out this important information. Despite everything, the hero notices that moving around feels completely normal. Grew curious about the origins of the mysterious arm and demanded to know where it came from. Sensing that had a right to the truth, agreed to reveal the secret, assuring him that he would share everything he knew. The creator of that arm was also the being responsible for bringing this entire world into existence, someone who could rightfully be referred to as God. Several boys hurried away, their faces filled with fear and anxiety. Bizarro and his group of assassins stared in shock at the scene before them. They saw humans who had wings and others who gave off an eerie, serpentine presence, creatures that seemed completely unnatural. None of them could understand what was happening in this bizarre land. One of the men pleaded desperately with his captain, asking him not to leave him behind. They walked away without glancing behind them. Bizarro believed he had seen everything and nothing could shock him now. Yet, at this moment, he was actually dead. The situation was not as it should be. At the same time, the heroes were being escorted to begin their assignment. Explains that with this plan, slipping past the enemy's defenses will be simple. Meanwhile, attempts to get a better view of the ongoing battle. The thick smoke clouds the air, making it hard to see. Assumes victory and turns to Roka, seeking her opinion, but she remains quiet. Concern starts to creep in for as he checks on her well-being. Roka, however, is clearly struggling. She confesses that fear is causing her legs to tremble. Teases her, poking fun at the so-called Thunder Empress for being afraid of high places. The woman's anxiety surfaced immediately. She promises that once they arrive, will be in for a scolding. Mentions that they are heading to the command tent, the place where the others are organizing all the strategies for the upcoming battle. The bodyguards would remain nearby, yet keep enough space to ensure safety. On the chaos-filled battlefield, unexpected events constantly unfolded. It was always possible for a comrade to be struck when least expected, even from behind. The commanders were always protected by those deemed the most trustworthy. Oka wonders whether her coworker is proposing that they dive straight into the task. He explained that their goal was to touch down close to the command tent, using the giant bird to circle overhead, and then return to retrieve them. Mentioned it would take her about a minute to fly all the way around. Assured everyone that this was plenty of time, warning that staying any longer would mean the guards would discover them. In the heart of the capital, the chameleon boy's mind filled with worry as he imagined already returning to the front lines. The protagonist, however, felt unaffected by these concerns, and simply expressed appreciation for the chameleon boy's concern. With determination, he vowed to demonstrate his gratitude through his actions, especially by making use of his arm. The chameleon boy encouraged him to relax and put more faith in his friends. Responded confidently, explaining that he already trusted them. In fact, they possessed even greater strength than he did. Still, he had made a vow to always stand by Roka. This declaration left the chameleon boy surprised, but he understood, recognizing that being human meant having feelings. That was what made. At last, the pair arrived at the summit of the castle. The group traveled atop a massive bird, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. The creature wasn't able to transport a large group at a time, yet its speed surpassed that of most birds, making it an ideal choice. The boy cautioned that the creature was extremely intelligent and advised everyone to treat it respectfully. The bird cast a wary glance in his direction, remained motionless, uncertainty clouding his expression. Grateful for the assistance, he expressed his thanks to the bird, surprised when it replied in kind. At the same time, the team of heroes found themselves facing new developments. Gestured downward, indicating the command tent below. In front of it, a formidable line of no fewer than 500 soldiers stood guard. Felt uneasy soaring above such a vast force, finding it almost unsettling. Meanwhile, Roka picked up on something strange, observing that its behavior seemed suspicious. The knight was all too aware of how unpredictable things could become on the battlefield. He braced himself for the worst, and even she understood why. Helena signaled that the moment had come and announced their descent. The bird swooped downward through the air. The basket slipped from their hands and landed on the ground. Without delay, the crew has made it ashore. The bird soared into the sky once more, drew her blades, signaling the group to rush toward the tent together. Roka acted first, making her move. Summoning her power, the Empress unleashed a bolt of lightning that crashed directly into the tent. Everyone felt the sharp sting. The group noticed that the tent was equipped with a lightning rod, a feature none of them had encountered before in such an unusual setting. Without warning, the flap of the tent was pulled aside. A group of soldiers carrying weapons became visible. The group looks around in bewilderment, puzzled by the unexpected presence of others, since they believed only bodyguards were supposed to be inside. The soldiers carried powerful weapons, ready for battle. Weapons at the ready, the soldiers closed in on the group from all sides. Confusion, Roka, unable to understand how their enemies had anticipated the ambush. It was clear that the opposing force had been fully prepared for their arrival. A mysterious individual moved ahead, emerging from the shadows. The commander remarks that their arrival was no surprise, despite the holy knights being considered outdated. However, the commander implies that this does not excuse the enemy from being prepared. Roka, sensing the man's frailty, wondered if he was truly the commander. The man admitted that he rarely appeared in person, but on this occasion he had come out of respect for his former partner. He watched as they fell, witnessing their defeat firsthand. Roka wonders how was aware of their arrival. Explains that he and his companions have been observing the group for quite some time. He admits that they should have confronted the Empress sooner, but unexpected setbacks delayed their actions. Believed his plan to bring her to this place would work, certain he had enticed her. However, Roka maintained she had come of her own accord, refusing to admit to any sort of trickery, though remained steadfast in his claim that she had indeed been drawn in. Positioned the items precisely according to the commander's instructions. The Empress stared in disbelief, her expression frozen with shock. She turned to her friend, searching his face for confirmation, but he offered no response, remaining silent. Gently brought up the fact that he had already shared the story of where he came from. His people had been driven from their homeland and relentlessly pursued, leaving them with no choice but to survive as fugitives. Because he is an exile, he remains loyal to his country. Explains that his family has always lived in constant flight. Though he expresses regret, he insists that his family's needs must take priority. Follows closely behind him. Roka throws a punch and lands it squarely on him. She turned away, abandoning her longtime companion lying helpless on the floor. Observing the scene, the commander couldn't help but consider the group rather peculiar. Slowly rose to his feet, his face marred by fresh bruises. Roka shot him a look filled with contempt, her eyes icy. Despite her anger, she admitted that she could not fault his logic. Deep down, she knew that in the end, nothing outweighed the value of family. Had not anticipated her reaction. The girl went on, making it clear that while taking her was one thing, involving everyone else in a dangerous trap and abandoning his friends was unforgivable. With bitterness in her voice, she condemned him, vowing never to forget this act of betrayal. She suddenly understood that everything he had done was in anticipation of this very moment. Remained silent, unable to find any words for her. Given the circumstances, she decides to let go of his actions, choosing forgiveness because they share the bond of comradeship. Offered another apology, clearly feeling responsible for what had happened. Roka admitted that he shouldn't have drawn everyone into such trouble, yet she accepted part of the responsibility herself. The Empress advised the group to remain safe aboard the bird once it returned. Attempts to protest, yet the other girl remains unwavering in her choice. Roka insists that the three of them, including, need to continue battling. The girl's words fail her, leaving her in stunned silence. Seizes his arm and pulls her forward, urging her to flee. However, the bird is struck by a bullet as it flies through the air. The sudden change in the air leaves both of them frozen in shock. The creature plummets and lands heavily on the ground. The creature fell to the ground, brought down by a military vehicle equipped with weapons. The commander finds their optimism entertaining. Meanwhile, heavily armed troops are surrounding them, preparing for an overwhelming confrontation, just three of them facing a massive force. Observed that with the Fire Emperor gone, there would now be two remaining. The commander, hoping to surprise, declares that the family of the Holy Knight will be spared. Hearing this, resigns himself to his destiny. Moreover, they are a long way from the border, so reaching it will mean crossing a dangerous battlefield. Roka feels guilty for involving in the situation and apologizes to her. Thinks it's odd to hear an apology but assures Roka that she has no regrets since she chose this path herself. The commander raised his hand, signaling for the operation to begin. They simply stood by, anticipating the arrival of the inevitable conclusion. Roka stood determined, her resolve unwavering as she declared her intention to keep fighting with every beat of her heart, regardless of what challenges lay ahead. Determined to the core, she resolved to claim his head no matter the cost. Acknowledged her fierce declaration with a solemn nod, silently admiring her courage. Added her own encouragement, reminding them that each enemy they defeated increased their odds of success. Appeared distracted, her thoughts elsewhere. She wondered aloud to whether the woman had summoned reinforcements but had no idea. Suddenly a new question arose in his mind: who did that enormous bird belong to? At last, made his dramatic entrance onto the battlefield. The hero noticed his friends trapped, unsure how they had ended up surrounded. In the sky, artillery units were already targeting their foes, with weapons raised and ready. Roka was the quickest to understand the situation. She comes to understand that her abilities have the potential to completely incapacitate them. A bolt of lightning crashed down from the sky, destroying the vehicle in an instant. The other soldiers respond by shooting at her, prompting Roka to notice the bullets speeding toward her. One of them strikes her in return. Let out a terrified scream, overwhelmed by panic. Roka, unable to do anything else, called desperately for her friend from childhood. Meanwhile, the hero's eyes shone with unwavering determination. Reached for his weapon and unsheathed his sword. He now held two blades, poised to strike. The sharp sound of a slice filled the air as the bird swooped down, ready to strike. Meanwhile, several soldiers remained unaware of the chaos unfolding around them. Sprang forward and landed directly above them. He quickly eliminates the first two opponents that catch his eye. A different soldier pointed a machine gun toward the hero, while anger burned fiercely in the hero's lifeless eye. Half of one soldier's face was suddenly torn away, while nearby, another frightened soldier raised his weapon, ready to fire. However, his friends are determined not to allow that. The hero moves forward without relying on assistance, though several armed opponents remain nearby. The soldiers set their sights on the pair, making them the next targets. Stands in disbelief, struggling to accept the reality unfolding before him. Nearby, a soldier urges the commander to step aside, but the commander dismisses the warning, insisting that everything is under control. Meanwhile, additional soldiers arrive on the scene, prepared to handle the aftermath. The scene was chaotic, littered with debris scattered everywhere. He surveyed the disorder and silently ordered his subordinates to remove the rubbish cluttering the area before him. Looked at with concern, wondering if he was injured, but remained silent, leaving the protagonist puzzled. Without warning, a gentle smile appears on the Holy Knight's face. At that instant, begins connecting the clues in his mind. Expresses astonishment that the hero has managed to come this far. The main character is desperate to find out what became of his partner. Even more pressing, he needs to learn the fate of his friend. Everyone would soon face defeat. expressed his regret to his friend. The Holy Knight announces that is expected to join the group shortly, leaving the protagonist at a loss for words. Overcome by anger, lunges toward his opponent. Before he has a chance to respond, a bullet strikes him. The bullet struck his shoulder, pain flaring instantly. Even as the agony surged, his mind focused solely on Roka. In his heart, he silently pleaded for her forgiveness. Had vowed to keep her safe, yet he failed to do so. The boy collapsed to the ground, overcome by defeat. Ultimately, his arm served no real purpose. He found himself wishing he possessed a special talent. His eyesight began to grow hazy, and then everything faded into darkness. He alone notices that his left eye remains able to see, yet confusion clouds his understanding of the situation. Eventually, comes to understand that what he's experiencing isn't visible through ordinary, open eyes. He was perceiving the world by feeling it deep within his heart. His hand began to move by itself, and at that instant he regained consciousness. He began to experience strange changes, his body undergoing an unexpected transformation. All at once, numerous eyes and mouths began to appear across his body. The figure's mouth opened wide in a scream, while their eyes fixed ahead, filled with a frenzied intensity. He is overwhelmed by the sense that he has become a complete monster. The commander noted that the target was still in motion, and instructed the others to focus their aim on the target's head. At that instant, the main character activates his dead eye, allowing him to spot unusual figures hidden among the people. A soldier moved toward the fallen hero, ready to deliver the final blow. On the hero's hand, a strange, mouth-shaped mark emitted an unusual noise. Suddenly becomes aware that the creature is experiencing hunger. Without understanding why, he watches as his hand shifts by itself, leaving him confused about where it is being pulled. To the human, the weapon remained a possibility. He stared at the unfamiliar shape of the mouth, unable to understand its purpose. Every detail of this strange arm puzzled him, yet at that moment the protagonist believed he might not survive long enough to uncover its secrets. The mouth embedded in his hand prepared itself to strike. Black tendrils wrapped themselves around the soldier, leaving everyone nearby stunned in disbelief. At that moment, a change came over. In that instant, the mouth remained open for several seconds before slowly shutting. The soldier collapses lifelessly to the ground. The commander stood as clueless as the rest, unable to grasp what had just occurred. Fear gripped everyone, leaving them motionless. Tu found himself bewildered by the unfolding events. The fungus's form began to stir, gradually lifting itself upright in a way that resembled a reanimated corpse. Upon witnessing the scene, the commander understands that the strange mouth on his hand is responsible for everything unfolding. At the same time, begins to connect the dots, figuring out the situation. Nearby, a soldier raises his weapon, preparing to fire. Once more, demonstrated his newly discovered power. The tentacles thrust their way through the surface. The helmets drained the energy from the soldiers as he watched. Once finished, the boys collapsed as if they had been struck by something powerful. Managed to surprise even himself with the incredible feat he accomplished using only a truck, while desperately yelled at him to calm down and put an end to the chaos. A single soldier regarded the hero with fear, convinced that this person was nothing short of a monster. Gunshots erupt from her weapon, striking him with a barrage of bullets. He simply unleashed his tentacles once more, draining energy from those around him, and in an instant, the wound on his face closed as if it had never been there. Noticed that this strange power resembled his own abilities, but the idea of taking lives unsettled him. He believed that ending someone's life was something only a higher power should decide. One of the guys suggested to their leader that they should leave, but the leader refused and insisted they were staying. Additional soldiers arrived, gradually encircling their intended target. Believes that, despite possessing abilities that seem almost divine, there is absolutely no escape from the current predicament. Based on his understanding, this power allows a person to absorb just a single life force at once. He had just witnessed his former friend skillfully handle 4 opponents simultaneously. Meanwhile, the commander barked orders at the squad, demanding they eliminate the trespasser. The soldiers rushed forward, determined to carry out the commands they had received. Despite the steady march of the troops, unease gnawed at one of the soldiers. The reinforcements had vanished, leaving chaos behind as they acted without restraint. A muscular figure closed in on his victim, dispatching him swiftly and without hesitation, A wide grin spread across his face as he did. Without pausing, he quickly eliminated 2 additional opponents at the same time. The commanders stood in confusion, unable to understand how events had progressed to this point. They realized that their opponent must have defeated every unit in his path and made his way across the river to reach their location. The soldier notices something shifting nearby. However, he realizes the threat only after it's already upon him. His friend suddenly collapsed to the ground, lifeless, while a cold blade pressed against his throat, making it clear that he was now the one trapped on all sides. The chameleon kids believed that anyone who tried to escape would risk their life, so most people ended up surrendering instead. Unfortunately, he did not win the battle. Shouted urgently to intervene, believing that Roka was still able to continue. However, there seemed to be something unusual about the hero.